Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting agenda for Monday, May 2nd, 2016. We do have some items on today's business, so we're going to go straight to discussion items. Dealing with discussion item number 1, planning around rapid transit station areas, parts, central plan. And we're going to have staff, Ms. Malone Wright, to provide us a presentation. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. After several months, I'm very excited to be here this evening and present to you Kitchener's first rapid transit station area plan, the Parts Central Plan. The primary purpose of the Parts Central Plan is to ensure and provide a proper framework and direction to guide growth and stability within the central rapid transit station area, along with recommendations for capital projects to ensure that the area develops in a way that is transit supportive and adds value to our community. The presentation this evening will start with some background to the project, provide some information on the process that was undertaken, introduce the Parts Central Plan, provide the highlights of the plan, discuss the next steps, including recommendations in the staff report. PARTS, or Planning Around Rapid Transit Stations, is about the planning around the ION station stops. The region, through an environmental assessment process, established the locations of the station stops and the route alignment. Currently, Grand Link, on behalf of the region, is busy with the construction project related to ION. In Phase 1 of PARTS, staff established the boundaries of the 5 station study areas, compiled the existing conditions for each of the station study areas, and prioritized the completion of the plans for each of the areas. Through Phase 1 of PARTS, it was also determined that some of the key work required to complete the station area plans is best prepared for all the station study areas at once. As a result, 5 corridor-wide initiatives were undertaken and completed in advance of the first station area plan. CSD Report 14-90 reported on the completion of those corridor-wide initiatives and launched the start of the Parts Central Plan. The development of the Parts Central Plan utilized an Integrated Planning Act Environmental Assessment Master Plan process. Numerous reports, plans provided background to the process. Staff from business units other than planning participated on the project working team. The process also involved extensive public consultation and community engagement with the assistance of consultant of community facilitation and new technologies. As part of the environmental assessment, there is a need to identify a problem, statement, or a reason why the process or plan is needed. The Parts Central Plan was needed to support and manage growth within the Central Station study area, which is anticipated to occur as a result of the region's light rail transit ION by determining the preferred boundary, the preferred land use and policy framework, and any infrastructure requirements needed to support and manage the growth. The first community engagement session on the Parts Central Plan was held on November 19, 2014. One of the tools used to engage the attendees and learn more about how ION would be used was to ask the attendees to map their route to or from an ION stop. This mapping tool was also used at the second community engagement session on May 26, 2015, where 3 scenarios were presented for the community's input. Stakeholder interviews were also held during both of these phases of consultation. On December 9, 2015, the third community engagement session was held to consider the preferred scenario for the Parts Central Plan. Comments and feedback received at the first 2 community engagement sessions confirmed that it was important to include parks, natural heritage or environmental lands, institutional lands, and low-density, stable, established neighborhoods in the station area plan. Consequently, the foundation or basis for the boundary of the preferred scenario utilized Scenario 2, the extended boundary, and further increased the boundary of the plan to include parks such as Victoria Park, Kaufman Park, and some lands identified as being natural heritage or floodplain. A small additional part of a stable, established neighborhood to include both sides of Lancaster in the planned boundary. Some of the land use designations outside the downtown were also reviewed to ensure sufficient density to support ION and to ensure there would be compatibility and proper transition between different land use categories and high and lower density of land uses. We introduced the use of StoryMap at our second community engagement session on May 26, 2015. Staff were on hand at the session to show how the application could be used to view and compare the 3 scenarios in 3D. Comments could be provided directly on the scenarios or submitted on a comment form through the application. Story Map was also used again on December 9, 2015 at the community engagement session. Staff again were in attendance to show how the application could be used to view all the information that was being presented on the preferred scenario. In preparing the Parts Central Plan and leading up to this evening, there has been extensive input and public consultation considered in the formulation of the plan. In February, the project working team went on 2 very cold and snowy site walks around the station area. We experienced the winter walk firsthand and know how important walkability is in all seasons. Members of the project working team also participated in the fall on a site walk and with involved members of the Schneider Creek neighborhood. Feedback reports from the 3 community engagement sessions prepared by our consultant for community facilitation provided input into the Parts Central Plan before you this evening. Staff also attended the annual general meeting of the Downtown Neighborhood Alliance, attended the Christkindl Market, and the Downtown Action and Advisory Committee. The overall goals of the Parts Central Plan are to establish the boundary of the station area plan. Policy 2D7 in the region's official plan requires municipalities to prepare station area plans for each major transit station area located outside of an urban growth center. So although we were not required to prepare a station area plan which included the urban growth center, it was important to include these lands because a station area plan is not just about land use. It is about connectivity and placemaking in the station area. Number 2, establish the land uses in the station area outside of the downtown or urban growth center. The downtown land use designations were reviewed and adopted by Council in 2014 as part of the city's new official plan. During that time, planning staff worked closely with economic development staff in setting the maximum floor space ratio for the downtown to realize the vision for the downtown and to help achieve community benefits. The review of the land use designations in the downtown was not in the scope of the Parts Central Plan. Other goals included identifying the areas for intensification and areas of stability, and finally, identifying the opportunities to make this a great place to live, work, shop, study, and play. The highlights of the Parts Central Plan are as follows: the identification of areas for growth, change, and intensification, and the conservation and protection of stable, established neighborhoods. A walkable, well-connected Parts Central area accommodating all modes of transportation and supporting ION. And finally, a public realm vision, streetscape plans, and urban design guidelines to support placemaking, walkability, connectivity, and ensure the central station area is an attractive place. The result is the Parts Central Plan, shown in the map on this slide. The boundary of the Parts Central Plan is 322 hectares in area, has 6 ION stops, illustrated by the blue numbered circles, and is the first and largest station area plan in the city of Kitchener. There are currently 14,019 people living and 12,980 people working within the Parts Central area. The Parts Central Plan includes 6 ION stops. This slide shows the region's rendering of these 6 ION stops. These renderings were prepared for the region's public consultation on the anchor wall design. All lands within the boundary of the Parts Central Plan are within 800 meters of 6 of the ION stops. The one exception is a small area of Victoria Park and a small portion of a parcel with frontage on Victoria Street adjacent to the Iron Horse Trail. One of the considerations in developing the Parts Central Plan was how cultural heritage resources would be addressed in the context of anticipated development and a redevelopment. This station area contains the greatest number of cultural heritage resources. Over 27% of the land parcels within the Parts Central area are either designated under the Ontario Heritage Act or listed on the city's municipal heritage register. There are 13 cultural heritage landscapes located in whole or in part in the Parts Central area, with several of these being over stable residential neighborhoods. One of the recommendations from the Parts Central Plan is to prepare a secondary plan and related policies to provide direction on appropriate and compatible development within specific cultural heritage landscapes, as well as the introduction of zoning regulations and urban design guidelines directed toward conserving cultural heritage landscape character. This is the high-level land use concept plan for Parts. This plan will give guidance to the preparation of a new secondary plan for lands outside of the urban growth center. This will involve further community engagement and consultation to deal with how Parts Central will site-specifically be applied to properties. As mentioned, the land use designations for the downtown were reviewed as part of the new official plan to ensure the provincial density target established for the Kitchener Urban Growth Centre could be met. The land use designations for the downtown are shown and shaded in red and can meet this target. No new land use changes for the Urban Growth Centre are proposed through the Park Central Plan. Implementation of the downtown land use designations will be taking place through the Crosby process in the coming weeks. The purple areas on our map are the mixed-use areas. The gray is the innovation employment. The blue is institutional. The green areas are park and natural heritage. The beige and darker beige are the medium and high-rise residential. And the yellow areas are our stable, established residential neighborhoods. At a minimum, the Province of Ontario's Transit Supportive Guidelines indicates that for LRT to be successful, a minimum density of 160 residents and jobs is required. Overall, in the Park Central area, there are currently 108 existing persons and jobs per hectare. We know the UGC or red area of the plan can achieve 225 persons and jobs per hectare. So one of the goals in the preparation of the land use plan was to determine the most appropriate areas for intensification outside of the UGC, but within the 800-meter radius of the ION stops. With the land uses that are proposed, the overall density in the Park Central Plan is anticipated to grow to 205 persons and jobs per hectare over the long term. If we exclude those areas in the Park Central Plan that are designated for low-rise residential, parks, or natural heritage, the proposed density could be 286 persons and jobs per hectare. The draft study area for the Park Central area and one of the scenarios reviewed through the process excluded the stable, established neighborhoods and primarily focused on the areas for intensification. Through the development of the Park Central Plan, it was important to include these neighborhoods. These neighborhoods contribute to the station area and also contribute to the ridership of ION. The inclusion of these lands in the Park Central Plan gives very clear direction as to the future use and intent of these lands and affords them with a level of protection, including neighborhood character and stability and cultural heritage protection, while recognizing their contribution and importance to the station area plan and reaffirming that these are not the primary focus for redevelopment and intensification. This map illustrates where we have medium and high-density mixed use adjacent to low-rise residential. Compatibility measures will be implemented through secondary plan policies, zoning provisions, and urban design guidelines to ensure new development and redevelopment is sensitive in scale and maintains the traditional character of these established areas, is pedestrian friendly, and ensures privacy and sunlight penetration on adjacent properties. This map is the Parks and Public Realm vision for the Park Central Plan. Public realm includes the spaces between buildings that can be freely accessed by the public and includes roads, parks, squares, as well as pedestrian and cycling routes. Outdoor space should stimulate the senses yet remain human in scale. The condition and quality of these spaces have a major impact on our quality of life. The public realm is a critical component of the Park Central urban fabric and identity. These public spaces are the platform for a range of community activities and social uses. They are the places for active play, quiet contemplation, public gatherings, festivals, and markets. The Park Central area currently lacks some key multi-use pathway linkages and could benefit from enhanced streetscape and public realm, among other connections. There are also some parks that are currently underutilized and which have potential to provide for a better contribution to surrounding neighborhoods. This map in the Park Central Plan outlines a number of opportunities that could be implemented to assist in making the central area a vibrant, livable, and identifiable great place. There are many opportunities on private properties to contribute to the parks and public realm vision for Park Central. As new development occurs, bringing additional residents and patrons to support local businesses, projects will be required to improve the public realm, streetscape, and provide additional public amenity areas. As rapid transit improvements are implemented, the nature of the Park Central area will evolve to become a more pedestrian-focused while maintaining vehicular movement, including bicycles. Redevelopment of sites within the Park Central Plan should provide new gathering spaces and amenity areas while contribute to a vibrant streetscape. A transportation assessment analysis was also completed and investigated the broader road cycling and pedestrian networks that relate to the preferred scenario. It provided an analysis of transportation network issues and opportunities within the Park Central area. It also identified any network capacity issues and opportunities to mitigate any significant traffic issues to be able to facilitate the preferred scenario over the long term. This map shows the active transportation network. An active transportation network, which includes a cycling pedestrian network, will be required to support transit and provide linkages for transit riders to get to their final destination. These pedestrian and cycling facilities will be required to connect adjacent residential and commercial areas to the downtown and to Ion. The Parts Central Plan contains opportunities for improving the walking and cycling network and will be investigated further through the development approval process and are analyzed and costed and reviewed through a future budget process. Another such tool for implementing the Parts Central Plan includes the preparation of an official plan amendment and corresponding zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate the vision for land use, urban design, natural cultural heritage, and transportation policies. This recommendation is contained in the staff report. Any official plan zoning bylaw amendment that is undertaking to implement parts will involve future direct public engagement and consultation. It is anticipated that this work will start immediately in the summer of 2016 and end in the first part of 2017. Through this process and in developing the Parks and Public Realm vision, it was determined that there is a need for a neighborhood-type park within Parts Central in the Innovation District area. One of the next recommendations in the staff report is that staff pursue the creation of a new public urban space in the Innovation District area within the next 10 years. This could be done through the development approval process and/or through city acquisition. In the Parts Central area, there will be greater future emphasis on compelling urban public spaces and related amenities, including a greater quality and quantity of streetscapes that function beyond transportation throughways. The Parts Central Plan is recommending that streetscape plans be developed in a priority sequence to provide guidance on the preferred built form and pedestrian interface. Bright Up Street is recommended as a high priority and an early win for creating a more pedestrian-friendly and multi-use space that can capitalize on nearby private and public investment. The next step would be to prepare a streetscape plan, which would provide a cost estimate for future consideration. The preparation of the streetscape plan will be carried over from the Parts capital budget into the implementation phase and thus will not require any additional funds. The last recommendation in the staff report is shown on this slide. Finally, staff intends to prioritize the streetscape, public realm, and transportation network opportunities identified in the Parts Central Plan. Much of the public work identified in this plan is likely more than 10 years into the future. However, any recommendations for investment anticipated sooner will be analyzed, costed, and reviewed through a future budget process. After several months of public engagement and consultation, the Parts Central Plan has been created to guide development and change in and around the 6 Ion stops, support the ridership of Ion, and ensure that the Parts Central area is an attractive place to live, work, study, shop, and play. The Parts Central Plan is the blueprint for the future. Staff asks that you approve the Parts Central Plan along with the other recommendations in the staff report to help realize the vision and goals for the Central area and guide and contribute to making Parts Central area a vibrant, livable, and identifiable great place in the city of Kitchener. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks, Ms. Malone-Wright. Councillor Neske, do you have a question? Because I won't be taking questions from staff yet until after. Yes. You can just ring in afterwards. Okay. We will go to the delegations. Just want to remind delegates, pursuant to Council's procedural bylaw, delegations are permitted to address the committee for a maximum of 5 minutes. And with our next delegation, we have Jane Pellier and Aaron Atkinson from the Schneider Creek Neighborhood Group. And so with that, we'll have 2, so we'll give you 10 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. The Schneider Creek neighborhood would like to thank you for this opportunity to participate in this meeting and to introduce our report, Making Our Neighborhood Great. As a community, we proactively undertook this exercise, this gathering of information, because we understood that if we were to remain a vibrant, resilient, healthy community that continued to thrive into the future, we would need to be open to the idea that change is coming. The key for us was the notion that a neighborhood needed to be a vital part of the conversation about that change. What shape would it take? How might it look and feel to an already established neighborhood? As we began our work, we learned that the city was in fact interested in engaging citizens to gather input into shaping policy. We hope that our efforts to contribute to that shape will be taken seriously because as a community, we certainly favor this approach as a first step in any development process. A year ago, our little corner of the core had no name. Today, we are Schneider Creek, a name steeped in our local history. We are an example of a community of interested city dwellers that came together to find not only fellowship, but common and varied views for our future as a community within this city that hurtles itself headlong into the future. We discovered these views by planning events that provided opportunity for conversations to begin. We explored a hidden away green space, adopting it for our events. It has become a perfect gathering place for our community barbecue and Halloween spooktacular. Our now annual porch party, visioning night, a Jane's walk, and the construction of our listening post were also opportunities for us to share our thoughts and ideas. We began to note what we like about our community, what makes it a great place to live, what our attributes and shared values are, and we identified some of our challenges too. Through these events, we discovered that residents value the neighborhood in its current form. The intimate scale of our narrow streets lined with older character homes, our front porches and gardens, and close proximity to our neighbors gives our neighborhood great charm. In fact, this intimate scale promotes a very neighborly and friendly community, making it easy for us to walk, cycle, and play. Just a sec, sorry. I hit it too fast. Despite the at times negative perception about the nearness of the downtown core, many people live here because they value the uniqueness of their homes and the diversity of the assets found nearby. We learned that we want to preserve the old beloved character of a neighborhood and blend it with respectful, thoughtful, innovative planning. For this, it means development that reflects the existing neighborhood, including the character, scale, and style of heritage homes with their porches and front gardens. We feel that zoning density and allowable built form should mirror the homes across the street. So zoning should be consistent on both sides of Martin Street, for example. Density on Cortland Ave should not be allowed to impose itself on the small scale of Martin Street. Similarly, Queen Street development should not be imposing on Benton Street. This is a prime example where we can see conflict occur between what a neighborhood wants and what a developer wants. When assigning zoning and density, be mindful that utility easements and regional road widening dedications do affect physical form and height, so adjust and lower density to suit the desired form. Residents would like the city to facilitate our participation in present and future zoning changes, adjustment requests, and development plans. We believe development property should not be allowed to sit vacant or boarded up for more than a year from their purchase. We would also like to see a streetscape vision for Cortland Ave with the region of Waterloo's participation. Schneider Creek residents want the long, rich history of our neighborhood to be respected, valued, and maintained. We want to prioritize walkability to our surrounding areas, to keep our little parks well maintained, clean, and safe for all, and to see our streets supported with the infrastructure that is appropriate to our small scale. The desire to not have high-rise buildings on Cortland or Queen Street, the care and development of a tree canopy, connecting Sandhills Park to Cortland with a public entrance, supporting the city's plans for improvements to the Iron Horse Trail, and investing in the creek as a community asset are other areas of interest. We can see both the potential and the necessity to work together to create, enliven, invigorate, and support neighborhoods where young and old alike can enjoy all their neighborhood can aspire to provide. We would also like to send special thanks to John McDonald and Margaret Santos, our business neighbors, for their incredible support and mentorship. They have facilitated this process of discovery and have been incredibly pivotal in the evolution of our community and this report. Thank you.
Hello. I'm just going to add a little, I guess, maybe higher level context and thoughts on this process and what its potential for the future of downtown Kitchener and all along the Ion. So PARTS is a plan that is encouraging broad and mindful consideration of a lot of issues and in terms of decision making, whether that be cultural heritage, green space, active transportation, and streetscapes. However, Parts is also rooted in a very specific and focused process on the detailed planning of the future of land and infrastructure in the ION, in the Parts area. And that around ION stops to ensure that recommendations for capital projects are developed in a way that are transit supportive and add value to our community. Ultimately, Parts aims to produce a framework for the central area to be an attractive, vibrant, identifiable, great place to work, live, study, and shop. But this is not and should not be a substitute for a larger understanding of the future we want for the city. I note this because I asked this committee to consider that Parts is designed to build a downtown that maintains the metrics required to operate a piece of infrastructure, an inanimate, although moving, piece of metal. And it will no doubt bring many benefits to the citizens of Kitchener, but it will not now or in the future be what creates a vibrant, welcoming, and desirable community, no more than shopping malls and wide arterial roads did in previous incarnations of downtown improvement. What will create a positive and desirable community will be the people and the conditions the city establishes to support people of all stages of life, all socioeconomic backgrounds, to live their lives, whatever that form may be, to the fullest in the heart of this city. This is a high-level strategic document that will inform a number of processes and policies, and it will impact the secondary plan, rezoning considerations, the urban design manual, and other bureaucratic documents and structures over the medium term, and ultimately the health of the city in the long term. It is essential that the committee and council recognize that this is a document, again, as I mentioned, narrowly defined in purpose, to make other opportunities for creative and modern public policy innovations subject to this document as the guiding document could have ill-intended consequences. I believe the only way to increase the chances of making resilient public policy decisions that will not be as costly as previous decisions that have been taken is to keep people at the center of the discussion. I will go so far to say that when property value and redevelopment are the main drivers of this decision-making, short-sighted policy decisions could be made. The potential impact of this project is enormous and very positive, don't get me wrong. But please make sure that the changes this committee and council put forward don't reduce the conversation to transit stops, density, and land values at the expense of the possibility of what could be. In general, there's a couple of other topics, namely regional roads and the role that the city has in relationship to the region through the process. That is one area there seems to be some conflict. For example, easements, etc., on regional roads have a big impact on neighborhoods. They run through neighborhoods, they cut neighborhoods off. And a lot of those rules have a lot to do with motorized vehicles. If public policy options are being employed to shift citizen behavior to active transportation, living and working in their locations, then old car era rules and regulations and policies should be reviewed and a new relationship should be established. So that comes down to things like active transportation, streetscapes. I just encourage you to consider how the region and all of the work that the two groups do interconnect with one another.
Okay, thank you. Hold on one sec. We have some questions from members of the committee for you. Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and making your presentation. The Schneider Creek Neighborhood Association, and I'm just looking at the map in front of me here, what boundary do you sort of cover in terms of your residents, and do you overlap with other neighborhood associations in the area?
Yes, so we're not a formal association. We are a group, so we are very lucky.
Informal.
Informal. Yes. So we're very lucky to be under the umbrella of the Mill Cortland Association, and they have a very long history of having different groups working underneath their association and working in concert with them and being supported by them. So right now, our general area is Queen Street, bounded by Queen Street, Mill Street, Cortland, and we go to about Cedar.
What's the last one?
Cedar.
Oh, Cedar. Okay. I'm just looking at the map and I see the area. Okay. And so, in terms of your presentation, did you submit your comments to staff initially during the whole process over the last year or two?
Yes. So, in anticipation of ION and changes coming, as Jane alluded to, we developed a report. So, basically, we collected information from our neighbors over the course of the past year or so, and consolidated it all into a report that we shared as part of the response to the parts process in December.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane and Aaron. We have no further questions for you.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Mr. Shields from GSP Group. Whenever you're ready there, Mr. Shields.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Ioannidis and members of committee. I'm here tonight to speak to several of the submissions we made last week on the parts plan. Uniquely, I'm here to speak on behalf of the planners at GSP. We sat down as a group and had a look through the plan. And as well, I'm here on behalf of Dundee RealX and Win 618 Inc., and both have made submissions. The parts plan is quite an extensive undertaking, and the staff team that worked on this have come up with a pretty comprehensive plan. They've looked at a lot of different aspects on the various components that make a successful downtown. And there's a lot of really good ideas and good recommendations to come forward. And indeed, there's more steps to come. Excuse me. But we really have a primary concern, and that's shared as well by some of our clients with respect to the densities that are proposed in the parts plan, especially given the new LRT system that we have and the new multimodal transit hub that is going to be located downtown. Really, we haven't changed from the current OP with this new land use plan, and we think there should be some changes. This shows the area in the central part of downtown where an FSR of 3 is being proposed, and around the edges, ironically, we've got higher densities than we do in the center part. And yes, there's a recognition that there is some bonusing, but the bonusing is not perfect, and it's fraught with some problems, we think. Even out in some of the outlying areas in the mixed-use nodes, we've got a density that's higher than what's now being permitted as a base condition, if you will, in the downtown area. The notion of bonusing is certainly one that a number of municipalities are exploring, but really, by having such a low base, we're not even recognizing a lot of the development that is in place. It really provides a lack of certainty for the development industry as well as the public. And it's going to require additional cost and time for development projects to go through zoning and OP process versus just a site plan kind of process. And it's really difficult to quantify the various elements that you're going to look to bonus. So it really gets into a lot of toing and froing and deal making. And I think we can step back, look at increased densities, and have a better base condition, if you will. In terms of Dundee RealX, you can see their property holdings in the downtown. It's a really large portfolio, and it includes, of course, a number of existing buildings, but also vacant properties and properties that are available or will be available for redevelopment as time goes on, too. So we think there's an opportunity here to recognize that the infrastructure capacity that we have, and indeed has been tested in the parts plan, which will provide for much greater density, and that we should be looking at providing for that density in and around the LRT stations. We've got a significant investment here in the LRT system. When all is said and done, I'm sure it's going to be approaching around $1 billion, and we need to really make sure that we capitalize on that and provide it the best opportunity we can to make that a success. If you look at Dundee's existing holdings, most of those are already over an FSR of 3. And the average across their portfolio, even with some of the ones that are lower, is over 3. I think more importantly, though, too, we've got to look at what's taking place in the market. And in order to make a project viable today, a density is much greater than 3, the base condition. These projects are all coming in, and these are ones that have recently been approved in the city. Some are even occupied now, but the densities are coming in the 7 to 8 range. So that would mean extremely large bonuses, and in fact, the bonus would be greater than the base condition. So for the sake of time, I'll just flip through this, but you can see that there's a lot of existing buildings downtown that are well above that, and even the city's parking structure is well above the base condition of 3. So with that in mind, excuse me, we ask for your consideration on the density level. We think there's good reason to increase the density, again, especially in and around the LRT stations. While we can meet some of the targets, I think we've got an opportunity around the LRT stations to increase that density and to come up with development that's really going to meet all the various goals that we have in the official plan for vibrancy and activity, jobs, and people living downtown.
Mr. Shields, can you wrap up, please?
So that's my presentation on that. I have one additional presentation as well on a specific property, and that is this one. And this is the block that is on King Street, Moore, and Wellington. Win 618 Inc. has purchased property in the middle of the block. It's the former.
Is this according to your second presentation? Because I'll give you
Yes,
another
this
5
is the
minutes
second
for
presentation.
that. Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to go sequentially.
Okay.
Beam me up. All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This one will be shorter, guaranteed. This block is extremely well located, too, with respect to transit service. You can see the multimodal hub and the LRT station on the left-hand side, the Bright Up block with the Google building as well in the middle, and then the block that we're speaking of here. Win 618 has interest in the property right in the middle of the block. It's the former Stabler Insurance building, and it's a long, narrow property that goes from King all the way back through to Moore. This is a block that is got a series of smaller properties, and I think the best solution here is a consolidation ultimately of some of these smaller properties so that we can get a good development project to go ahead. Extremely well located site, very, very close to the transit system. The proposed parts plan, though, takes the block, cuts it up into a series of different designations. The Win 618 property in the middle is proposed to, in fact, have its density reduced from an FSR of 4 down to an FSR of 2. And the corner as well at Wellington, same thing, a low FSR of 2. The bottom end by the McDonald's, or the former McDonald's, has an FSR of 4. And there's a handful of houses along Wellington that have a different designation. So our submission to you is that the plan really fails to recognize the strategic location of this site, its proximity to really good transit service, and the need to look at some form of high-density designation across this entire block so that a comprehensive redevelopment solution can be facilitated here. So that, Mr. Chairman, is my two submissions to you.
Okay, we do have some questions, and I guess you can address both of them as whatever member of council sees fit to ask. Councillor Yaneski.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Glenn Shields, and making your presentation. I've read over the submissions you mailed out to us or to staff, and then eventually to us back on Friday. And I understand basically the gist is the issue is density that you just pointed out, and I basically do concur with you on this. However, as a result of this, staff have gone ahead and prepared a response to it. And have you seen the response of staff's position on this?
No, I haven't.
Okay. and I think maybe staff should address that, because I know you've got it addressed to us, but they basically provided a response to your answers on it, and I'm not going to go through it right now because it's quite a bit of detail, and I'll maybe just leave it to them. But basically, they have sort of addressed it, and there's a process for you to deal with the density issue. So I think maybe you should just communicate with staff, or they should communicate actually with you in terms of a reply. But
No, I'm only too pleased to sit down with staff, and we've had a number of conversations along the way. What I really want to bring home, though, is that the bonusing approach, if you will, just doesn't have a lot of certainty to it. And I understand there's staff will be trying to prepare some kind of template, if you will, or scheme as how to implement it, but there's a lot of arbitrariness to the whole bonusing situation. Trying to quantify these things is very, very difficult. And, some sites just aren't going to lend themselves to very many of these potential bonusing elements as well, especially the smaller sites. If you haven't got a heritage building on your site, or, you haven't got the ability to create some public park space and all these kind of things, that makes it more difficult to enter into it. And you can see from the density levels of most of the new projects in the downtown, we're talking about, a significant density that's required to make projects viable in the downtown area. And indeed, this is the place where we do want to have dense projects. This is downtown. This is this is the area that's got to have the best accessibility of any place in the region once we get the LRT in place and the multimodal transit hub in place. So this is the place where we should encourage that kind of intensity so we can have, a really vibrant community, lots of jobs, lots of people living and working downtown, less car use, and all those good things. So, but we need to provide some certainty to the development industry and to the public as well as to what they're going to expect and what we all should expect downtown.
And I do agree with your comments there. So I would suggest that they sort of have answered the question. There is still a process of rezoning and et cetera that's going to take place. And so I think that would be the better way of dealing with that as we go through this process. So you just have to communicate between the two of you, and I think it'll come to fruition.
Okay, we have Councillor Kelly Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I think where Councillor Unesky was trying to go is, would you feel comfortable with if we added a clause to the report to suggest that we have staff make sure that we look at this Part Central plan regarding the downtown density FSR bonusing in the Crosby consultation? Would that give you some assurance that we are going to look at it moving forward just in a separate process?
Well, I think it's more than just the zoning and the Crosby portion. I think we really should go back and look at this corridor and look at the area in and around each of the transit stations themselves and provide a much greater base density. The infrastructure is there, the sewer, the water services are all there. I think if you go to other communities, even some nearby, look at the base condition that they're providing for around the transit system, it's a lot greater than 3.
But if we attempted just to do that in a different process, would you be okay with that?
Sure, we've got time between now. The next steps are to hopefully do some refinements.
Right.
The secondary plan, the official plan amendments and zoning, isn't coming back immediately. So there's certainly time to sit down and do that. But, the density is really important. 160 was mentioned earlier, and that's certainly a minimum target for rapid transit. But if you look at the other Metrolinx documents, they're suggesting around major transit stations that we should be targeting between 200 and 400 persons and jobs per hectare. So, this Central Station, Union Station, whatever we're going to end up calling it, is going to provide unbelievable transit accessibility here and transportation accessibility. So we should be looking at, building really intensive neighborhoods around that. Recognizing, of course, we've got stable residential neighborhoods around the edges, and it's not to intrude on those. But we've got the ability through good urban design, through good architectural design, to do that. And we can, I think, work through these issues.
Okay. I'd like to bring forward that additional recommendation at the appropriate time.
Okay, it's noted. We have Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. Thank you, Mr. Shields, for coming in and, articulating your perspective, and also on behalf of your clients. You and I have had some conversation about this, and in my conversations with staff, I've come to learn that I think that you may be quite pleased with the clarity with which the bonusing menus will be articulated, but we're not there yet. End of May is May 30th is when. Are you aware that May 30th is going to be when we're starting with the next phase of the Crosby?
I just found out tonight.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw process will be tabling our urban growth center zones for consultation, and for sure, we would very much welcome your input throughout that process. I wonder if you could recognize that when you're talking about how we need to really create a more vibrant, livable downtown, I think that that's very much. Would you agree that it's very much in line with the concepts that some of the things that would be bonused would enhance the livability and vibrancy of our downtown?
Oh, for sure.
Right.
But again, not all those things can come on the back of development projects either. The vibrancy comes from a lot of different sources. It comes from public initiatives and private initiatives as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Just yeah. So thank you very much for your feedback. It's valuable, and we look forward to continuing this plan.
As do we.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you, and thanks for coming in this evening, Mr. Shields. Particularly, it was as we look at this block that's on the screen right now. You talk about a higher density, but at the same time, there's the need to find that balance with the residential area across the street on Wellington. And so, in your mind, how would you do that in terms of balancing that out?
Excuse me. I think, we've got a built form there that's in the 3-story range on the other side, on the stable residential side. If that block redeveloped and it included those houses in that property, it'd probably lend itself to a solution where we had something in the order of 3 to 6 stories perhaps on the opposite side, then stepping back, having the taller buildings and the more intensive development down towards, let's call it the south end, and down towards the King Moore intersection there. But again, I think there's ways to address those edge conditions through both uses and through good urban design. There's ways to do buildings now with softer edges, even when you've got parking podiums, like 144 Park Street in Waterloo, where they've laminated brownstones around the bottom of a parking structure. So there's lots of good design techniques that can be implemented to ensure that we get that good fit.
Okay, and when you, further to Councillor Galloway-Seelock's question then, on the issue of zoning and the higher densities, you're comfortable to leaving that to the discussions that are going to happen as part of the Crosby process then, just to be clear?
Well, we haven't entered into any of those discussions. This is a plan, this is a concept, and this is some direction. The next stages are to come forward with the implementation tools, those being the official plan amendment and the zoning amendment. So between today and those documents coming back, I hope we can, visit these issues and come to some concurrence on them.
Okay.
I think part of it is, for lack of a better word, a philosophical approach as well. I just don't think we should leave everything to bonusing so that the bonus is greater than the base density.
Right.
The whole bonusing intention was meant for things around the margins, so to speak, to deal with special conditions. Whereas here, we're flipping it around the other way, and we're making the bonus far greater, or likely far greater than what we got for a base condition.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, those are all the questions I have for you. I have some questions for staff at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Shields. We have no further questions for you. Our next delegation is Mr. Pigeon from GSP Group. Welcome, Mr. Pigeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here this evening as well, specifically with regard to two developer groups. The first is the ZARE Group, and the second is Momentum Developments. And there were letter submissions made at the end of last week. So the ZARE Group owns 607 King Street West, and they recently acquired the former Rats Bechtel Funeral Home. So they now own from 607 to 621 King West. So this parcel on the screen is approximately 5 acres, and it falls within 200 meters of the multimodal hub, and certainly within the Parts Central plan. And the ZARE Group has two specific comments. First of all, they are concerned that the central plan permits an FSR maximum of 4.0, and that any additional density is based on bonusing provisions. And to date, we don't have those density bonusing provisions defined. So what qualifies for density bonusing, what community benefits are to be applied in terms of density. So for example, the preservation of the Rats Bechtel funeral home, former funeral home, the Kaufman House, how does that translate into a density bonus for this site? There simply is too much risk associated with the density bonus process. Secondly, the central plan includes two designations in close proximity to the ZARE property. So first of all, there's the mixed-use high density. That's the purple area which the site falls within. And then the second on the other side of the railroad tracks is the innovation district. And in the central plan, there is contemplation of Walter Street extension for a pedestrian corridor. That's the yellow dash line running east-west, east-west over to Charles Street. And then the second is the possibility of a central park to be located somewhere in the vicinity. So the ZARE Group's indicated they may not have a concern with the pedestrian corridor, but they are opposed to a neighborhood park being located on their lands. It's on page 40 of the central plan is where it identifies the ZARE property and it labels a potential major civic park / urban space and potential privately owned public space, and it's unclear to us as to where those places are to be located. They are not in support of a park, but they may certainly be willing to support a pedestrian connection. It's just unclear to us as well whether the City of Kitchener has approached the railway with regard to this pedestrian crossing of the railway in that location. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes comments with regard to ZARE Group, and I didn't know whether we would seek clarification of staff on the ZARE Group two particular comments and then move to Momentum Developments. I'm in your hands.
Well, right now we're going to take questions from members of committee, and then
I would like to provide you with the Momentum comments.
Okay, you can do that after.
Do that now?
You can do that now, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm also here on behalf of Momentum Developments, and as this council knows, they developed 1 Victoria and also approved 100 Victoria for significant mixed-use development. And both of those properties were approved with considerable higher density than the 3.0 that is anticipated in the central plan, both in excess of 7.0 FSR. So like the Zaire Group, Momentum Developments, they're local, so they were born and raised here, they're local developers, and they're local investors in this community. Momentum began in student housing in Waterloo, but of course have moved beyond that and in fact developed in Waterloo three significant projects, the 42 and the red condominium opposite Bauer Lofts. Momentum was attracted to Kitchener as a result of City Council's decision and commitment to improve the downtown, to make it a great place to live, work, and play. And Momentum wanted to be a part of that transformation. And the Part Central Plan is perhaps the most important city initiative since the Downtown Kitchener Action Plan. And that is, of course, the predecessor was the Mayor's Downtown Task Force, where Council approved over $300 million as stimulus for private investment in the downtown. Well, from Momentum's perspective, the Central Plan is not inspiring confidence for continued private investment. The 3.0 FSR is simply too low, and there's too much risk, as Glenn indicated, with regard to the bonusing system that's undefined. So from our perspective, there's something just not quite right about bonusing from 3.0 to 7.0 or higher. Rather, bonusing should be a finessing. In other words, if you had a base of 6.0 and you were finessing the bonusing to 7.0, 8.0, it seems to me to make more sense rather than more than doubling the base. So Momentum's expectation was that there would be a considerable increase in density in the central plan. In fact, all we've done is maintain the official plan density that applies. And in the City of Kitchener, the zoning bylaw was approved by Council in 1985, so that's 30 years ago. And that zoning bylaw permits a maximum density of 4.0, which is what we're seeing in the central plan. So here we are 30 years later, and we still have the same base of 4.0 FSR. Staff have indicated that we are meeting the provincial targets with this central plan, but that is a minimum target. And there's much more to meeting, there's much more at stake here than meeting a provincial minimum target. We have over $1 billion in investment in the LRT, and certainly Kitchener Council has been a leader in seeing the transformation and the success of downtown improvement and renewal. Mr. Chairman, San Francisco, New York City, and a great Canadian example, Vancouver, are great cities because of their downtowns, and that's what this central plan should be espousing to. I'm going to quote Jane Jacobs, and she said, "You can't rely on bringing people downtown, you have to put them there." And that's exactly what this plan needs to do. It needs to be attractive for investment. Developing in the core, in the suburban area, is easy. Development in the downtown is not so easy. And it takes a great deal of effort to provide for that. We need a policy document that will speak to it. The central plan is underwhelming, and Momentum has a number of property acquisitions that they're going to revisit in light of this plan. They have respectfully requested that Council take another look at intensification for downtown. And downtown is the lifeblood of any city. I should tell you that while City of Waterloo does not do an FSR, they don't use FSR as a density calculation, we did a calculation of what an equivalent FSR would be. They have all of their stationary plans out, and their equivalent is 6.0 as a base. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we do have some questions for you. Mr. Pidgeon, Councillor Unesky.
Yeah, thank you for coming in, Mr. Pidgeon, and providing your position on this. And similar to the comments I passed on to Mr. Shields, to communicate with staff or get your increase in density. What struck me in terms of your presentation was your comment on the Kaufman building, the old former West Bechtel site, that has some historical heritage significance. And I was just wondering, you're talking about development there and increasing density, but also bonusing. Would that tie in with the intent of preserving the Ratspectal building, or I'm not too sure where you're coming from on that?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, the Zaire Group owns the Ratspectal former funeral home and the Coppin House. So their intent is to preserve that dwelling, and they have a heritage consultant looking at it now. My point is, they don't know what the development of the balance of their lands is going to be. They're working on that now, but there's been no submission made to the city, and they haven't come to a conclusion. If we don't know how the preservation of that former dwelling and that heritage resource, how that equates to density bonusing. They have a 4.0 FSR on that property, but they don't know whether the preservation of that dwelling will equate to a 5.0. That was my point, Councillor.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I think through the process that was identified of us going through the official plan, secondary plan for the area, the Crosby zoning, at that process, that's when you can ask and make your submission or appeal through staff and to get your increase in FSR to a reasonable rate to make the development more viable. And I basically agree with you and Mr. Shields on this, so I think that's basically where you should be going to in the end. And Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I'd like to move the staff report at the appropriate time.
Okay, that's noted. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair Nettis. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Pigeon. Just one question. Actually, I'm happy you brought up the Waterloo comparison, and you said that from your notes it's approximately 6.0 for an FSR ratio. Are you aware of any other conditions that Waterloo may have that may be a bit of an analog for our bonusing, or is it just simply an easier process how Waterloo has done it in your impression?
Chair, I think that the Waterloo base is at the stations is almost as of right. So while they do have density bonusing as well, it's a little more defined than it is in the city of Kitchener. Of course, now I've heard tonight, as well as Glenn did, that's going to come out towards the end of the month of May. So we'll be involved in that process. But the baseline policy formulation is at the official plan level in Waterloo, and that's what we don't see through this central plan. So this central plan, really the base in downtown is 3.0.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Pigeon. I'm pretty sure some of your questions will be addressed when it's time for staff's questioning, which is actually now.
Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. And maybe before I start getting into my questions, do staff want to maybe respond to any of the issues that were raised this evening? And then I can get into my questions after that? Because they may respond and I don't have to ask the question then.
Yes, sure, that's fine. Ms. Malone?
Sure, yes.
Right?
To answer the question, I think I want to clarify that there's two processes to implement the OP and zoning through this process. So first off, the official plan, the land use designations in the downtown were established through the new official plan. So through Crosby, we're going to be implementing new zones for those land use designations. We can't change those. They were adopted as part of the new official plan. The second process that we would be undertaking is a secondary plan for the lands outside of the UGC. So there's the opportunity to look at the land use designations on those lands, for example, the property on King Street. And then we would be doing zoning to implement that as well. With respect to the base FSR of 3 in the downtown, it is true that we are proposing bonusing. And a lot of the examples that were given by the delegations this evening were established prior to the adoption of the new official plan. So we haven't had an opportunity to implement the new policy framework. The bonusing provisions are contained, the policies for those are contained in the official plan, so it's very clear the number of things that we'll be able to bonus for through the new zoning. And also, I believe that the new zoning bylaw will give more certainty and it will not be an arbitrary process, unlike the process that has been followed in the past. For example, there have been a couple of properties where they've had to submit an OPA and zone change application, which would not provide any certainty to process. The justification for the increase in the FSR and those OPA and zonings were based on a type of bonusing. So one of the developments provided residential development, one conserved cultural heritage resources. So we were able to justify an increase in the FSR through an OPA and zone change process rather than through the bonusing, which is what we're proposing now through this plan, is doing bonusing in conjunction with, well, not in conjunction, we're doing bonusing not the way that we used to do bonusing. It's going to be very clear in the zoning bylaw what you can bonus for and the amount of the bonus. And hopefully that provides some clarity to the committee.
Okay, so in light of that, I do have a few questions. First of all, if I understand correctly then, they will be able to look at the higher FSRs through this next process that's coming up towards the end of the month, correct?
That is correct, through bonusing for the UGC zones, the downtown zones.
Okay, so the properties that we've talked about today would all be covered off?
The Zaire Group property and the Wynn, I believe, 618 property would be in a different process where we'd be developing a secondary plan and then zoning in conjunction with that. We would have the ability to utilize bonusing through that process as well, because we've put a policy in the Part Central plan which would allow us to look at bonusing for properties within 450 meters of a station or an ion stop.
Okay, so I guess what I'm struggling with a little bit here is by having a lower FSR with all these bonusing provisions, is it not setting a false expectation in terms of the neighborhood around what may or may not be allowed? In other words, if your base FSR is 3 and now all of a sudden you're going to go to a 7 or 8, I can see people getting quite alarmed about it. Whereas if your base starts at 6 and you go to a 7 or an 8 based on certain criteria, that becomes more something that's, seems more reasonable. And so I'm trying to understand the logic behind that.
Through the zoning, we would be also proposing other regulations, urban design regulations, and we would also be looking at the transition policies through the secondary plan process for those properties. I guess not every property is going to be able to develop to the maximum FSR of 3. Some may be able to exceed the maximum FSR of 3 if they do the bonusing provisions, but it will be reviewed on a site-specific basis. It's difficult to put a blanket FSR of higher than 3 throughout the downtown without knowing the site-specific implications of that.
Mr. Sloan, you want to address that question as well?
Thank you. And through the chair, just to supplement what Tina's been talking about, and perhaps my colleague from Economic Development Downtown may want to assist as well, because really where we were at with looking at downtown was 2 years ago through the official plan. To be honest, that's the appropriate time for a lot of the comments that we're dealing with today. The region set out, thou shalt do stationary plans, and you don't do them for downtown. So technically, this plan before you tonight did not have to include downtown. We've included it because there's important placemaking and streetscape opportunities we wanted to identify. As it relates to the future of downtown and density, it's pretty much going to be a lot about balance. There are things that are about to come forward that will help keep Kitchener and downtown Kitchener as a competitive advantage. I would question some of the information that was provided tonight by some of the delegates, especially as it relates to Waterloo and other places. But we don't need to get into a whole dialogue and discussion about that. It's great to compare to San Francisco, New York City, Vancouver. Some components of a mid-sized city like Kitchener, especially along King Street, may want to achieve more of a balance that's not super tall towers everywhere, but a bit of a different Main Street condition. What we're going to be looking at is, and that's why we're suggesting tonight that we would work with the specific parties, the delegations, but other stakeholders that have an interest in downtown to look at this density and bonusing provisions, but also with the community. So it's like we've been saying for a while, it's not intensification at all costs. If our city's going to grow up, then there has to be some positive benefits to the community. And that can be provided, as one of the delegations said, through both public and private initiatives. There is a great list of initiatives that are to come forward. Some of them include residential units. There's a high desire for more residential downtown. That would be almost a fairly automatic one to look at. Affordable housing or LEED buildings or transportation demand management provisions. These are things that if we go through this community public process through the Crosby project that we're about to do in May and June in the summer, we need to work with the community to see that they are okay with having this added density downtown in exchange for these community benefits. We'd like to work with the development industry and the stakeholders on that because we probably have a win-win-win situation for Kitchener moving forward. That will address and hopefully provide a process whereby we could get closer to this floor space ratio we're talking about of 6.0 through a very simple, a very clear process that is quite different from the trials and tribulations that Toronto has to go through or other cities. Anything that's really tall and really big, there probably should be some measure of public process in that. But if we can work through a framework with the industry and the community in the coming months, that we hope will provide the certainty. It will provide for more kind of base knowledge floor space ratio than anywhere else in the city. So with that, I think those are helpful points, and maybe Corey may want to add a few points in about that balance of floor space ratio downtown, because we've been working together on this.
Mr. Bloom?
Yeah, through the chair, I think just to supplement Mr. Sloan's comments, I think we're actually in agreement with the delegates on that we do believe there's a place for density downtown. It's a question, I think, of the process to get to that density and as of right versus an ability to do it through bonusing. So I think we're on the same page. It's just a matter of the tool and the process to get there. I would say, though, that we are, I think as a community, we want to be committed to not just building, but building well. And I think that's what we hope a bonusing provision will help achieve, that we're not just building for the sake of building density, but we're building good density that provides benefits back to the community. So I think we're actually all in agreement. It's just a matter of us sitting down with the industry and working through it.
I have several more questions, but I'll come back.
Okay. I do have some questions myself now after that, but hopefully other members will address them. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I did actually want to touch upon, I know you didn't want to get into it, Mr. Sloan, but I want to touch upon a little bit the Waterloo comparison. Has staff looked closely at Waterloo's plan through the lens of potential developers in terms of certainty?
Mr. Sloan?
Through the chair, we've been working quite closely with City of Waterloo and City of Cambridge and the region over the last many years on rapid transit stationary planning. So Waterloo just released and tabled their plans for their station areas. They have not prepared the secondary plan and zoning yet that would detail out the specifics of each of those station areas. Waterloo and Kitchener do have a different way, and Mr. Pigeon attempted to do some comparables that would be good to dialogue about as to how we measure density. In many cases, Waterloo has maximum height. They measure density in some cases in bedrooms per unit. And in Kitchener, in downtown, we have no maximum height limits, but we measure it in floor space ratio, not a units per hectare or bedrooms per hectare. So it's not exactly an apples for apples comparison. Have we been looking at it through various lenses? Yes. Are we different communities? To some extent, yes, I would say so. Is the future bright for downtown Kitchener in the central area? Absolutely. In fact, I think we can go beyond where things are at even with Waterloo right now if we're looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future. So we have been looking closely and working with them, and we're going to continue to do that as they work on their secondary plan and zoning to implement their plans. And that's what the next step is for us to do as well.
Okay. So from very high level, I guess my concern somewhat is we have a representative from Momentum who is, I think, been an excellent partner with the City of Kitchener, and they're voicing the concerns about the floor space ratio. And the blessing and curse of a system like the LRT is, from a developer standpoint, oftentimes they don't really care which stop they're at. They look at the value of the land and how difficult it is to build a tower. And frankly, from the person that lives there, it's not much of a concern either, because that's why rapid transit's there. So can I get an assurance from staff at this point that through the processes that we've already heard, I don't want to compete with the City of Waterloo in terms of being better, but can I get some assurance that the developer lens will be looked at and we will at least be an even playing field as far as developers are concerned?
Through the chair, what I'd suggest, one option that we would be open to is if committee and council wants to provide any kind of recommendation or direction that through the implementing secondary plan and zoning for the parts plan outside of downtown, and or through next steps on dealing with downtown density and zoning, that we have a stakeholder group that includes the development industry to be ingrained into that process. And that way we can ensure that we are including even more of that lens.
Okay. Yeah, actually, I think that's appropriate. Can that, I'm not sure necessarily needs to be an amendment to the motion, or can that be implied? I'm looking to the chair for...
I think it can be applied.
Thank you.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have one question to staff, and I think I take comfort from what I've been hearing from Tina and Brandon. But I just wanted to ask, in any future discussions with developers and landowners in regard to increased densities, what will we be doing to make certain that we allow and encourage residents in neighboring communities, like those on Walter or Wellington Street or Schneider Creek that we've heard from, what will we be doing to make certain that they participate in these discussions? And if there is anything that goes from this committee in way of direction to staff, I would want to see some mention of that in that direction. But anyway, that's my question.
Through the chair, what's to come next is another community engagement process. So although there are certain notifications and processes we have to follow in accordance with the Planning Act for the secondary plan and zoning, we usually go above and beyond that. And so the public, general landowners will be part of that process. The other thing to draw your attention to is the drawing on page 34, which I think is also an appendix to the staff report. That outlines some of the locations that Councillor Etherington spoke of, that some of those streets and neighborhoods are outlined in yellow on that page, and where they come close to those possible higher density areas, we've identified those with a certain item on the map about that's a transition area. And so that's what we need to work collectively on at that time, is what are the appropriate setbacks, step backs, and other transitional guidelines from a design standpoint that we can do. And that's what, in response to some of the questions that one of the delegations, Mr. Shields, was talking about. The public will be part of that process. We're going to start up in the summertime internally, and so there'll probably be some public engagement sessions in the fall. There'll probably be at least It's going to take a good 6 to 8 month process that we're going to be going through. Lots of opportunity, and it's going to be more formal. There's going to be a lot of direct mail-outs and letters in addition to the standard notifications. We're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of zoning.
Very much.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. I want to ask just about whether or not this new way forward with having a lower FSR baseline with many opportunities for bonusing through improvements that the city is looking for. Are there any examples in other municipalities where that's already working, or is this such a new concept that we haven't seen too many examples?
Yes, through you, Chair. This will be a unique approach, and it's a unique approach not just for Kitchener, but other municipalities. So the policy framework that we put in the official plan has not been implemented yet. We've done some research. Not a lot of municipalities have implemented this new bonusing framework, or bonusing for the same amount of community benefits. But the approach that we're going to use will be unique and different. So I think the development industry is used to a certain bonusing approach in other municipalities, and ours will definitely be unique, and we'll have to wait in the coming weeks to see what that is.
Yeah, and so how often do we amend our official plan?
In terms of a new official plan, usually every 20 years. We review it every 5 and maybe possibly 10 years. So this is a unique opportunity, but there is an opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years to review the policy framework in the downtown and see if it still fits.
Okay, so I can tell that staff have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about this project, and that there's a lot of confidence that it will work, and so I can fully appreciate that. I just wonder if we have some hesitation here. So if development were not to move forward as quickly as expected, is what you're saying that within 5 to 10 years or so that we could adapt to encourage more growth more rapidly if need be?
Definitely. If we're not getting the results that we want in the stationary, we can definitely revisit the policy framework.
Terrific. I especially will be looking forward to the conversations around the buffer zones, because as a representative of several downtown neighborhoods, that is of particular significance to those living in low-density neighborhoods and adjacent to the higher density zones. I also want to just mention publicly, in full disclosure, that I do live just on the edge of this plan. So I am in the low density area, but that is something to note. But I don't see it as a conflict of interest because there's nothing changing in our established neighborhood here. Thank you.
Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much. And so I do have several more questions. First of all, then, in terms of the next phases, so none of the decision that we're making tonight will necessarily negatively impact our ability to address some of the issues going forward, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In terms of the Schneider Creek neighborhood, and if I look at the map on page 34, and maybe just in general, I'll say overall, I'm really impressed with the quality of the work that's gone into this report. And I'm particularly pleased to see that there are established low-density residential areas, those in yellow, that have been, as I see it, maintained in this plan going forward, which I think is important for established neighborhoods. And so, particularly for Schneider Creek, if I'm looking at it correctly, you've identified much of that neighborhood in yellow, with obviously the need to address the buffer areas that several people have talked about, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good. Because I think that is important. I mean, I applaud the Schneider Creek neighborhood for the work that they've done. In fact, their in many ways being leading edge, because they're starting to get into some of the kinds of stuff that I think we're planning our neighborhood strategy and some of the work that's going to be done through it in the months ahead. They're actually a step ahead of the rest of the city. So congrats on that front. But I think that's going to certainly help in terms of dealing with some of these buffer areas. As you address this issue of increased density and look at, trying to make sure that we're keeping an even playing field as people are looking at where to invest, I guess one of the things that I think is important to look at is this notion that, time is money. And so, if people are having to go through, particularly in some areas, such as this, where higher density, in my mind, seems to be consistent with what we're envisioning, for the city. I think it's important to find that right balance between, protecting the existing neighborhoods like the other side of Wellington, but also not adding a whole lot of extra cost that, quite frankly, we could be putting on to developers in terms of urban design and so on, when the choice can either become go through costly processes or put that money into urban design. And so I think that needs to be considered as part of what we look at going forward in terms of this process and what the right density is. And so hopefully through that stakeholder group that you've referenced, you can have some of those discussions before this comes back to us.
Okay, we have no further questions. I'm going to ask a few questions. Dealing with the neighborhoods in yellow, again, the stable neighborhoods, I agree with the concept, but I just want to make clear that this doesn't stop redevelopment projects within these stable neighborhoods, correct? As long as they fall within the low-rise residential timeframe and urban designs that will be put forward in the secondary plan, is this correct?
They could do minor intensification in accordance with the zone that's applied to the property, yes.
Okay.
Anything above that would require going through a public process.
Okay, that's good. I guess dealing with the certainty of because there is no other further questions, and I want to make clear about the decision about FCR and what's that? FSR. What did I say? FXR? Sorry about that. But anyways, I know I had mentioned that I would say that be put in, but I would like to see that put forward in a written form. Okay. Is it clerk? Okay, so the main motion is being moved by Councillor Yaneski, and this will be an amendment to the main motion. And we have no further questions, so we will move the amendment first. All those in favor? Oh, we want some comments? Okay. Well, we didn't have any put up there. Okay, Councillor Yaneski?
Yeah, thank you very much. I thought we'd just have a few words to say about this particular process that we have gone through for the last a couple of years, I guess. It's been quite intense with the involvement with the whole city in terms of all the residents and businesses that have been involved. This is a superb document that has been presented by staff. Again, another wonderful document. Thank you very much. Very colorful. It addresses a lot of issues from the land use to connectivity, urban design, streetscape, public realm, and a variety of other components to it. Very colorful. It's well laid out, and I think staff needs to be commended on an excellent job. I know it's not finished yet. You've still got a process to go through the Crosby and the official plans and everything else that's tied in. We still have our work ahead of you, or you have your work ahead of you, which you will understand that you'll be addressing and meeting with the industry to address their concerns as well. So I want to thank you very much. I am going to support this very, very highly, and do make the motion that this be supported by all of council. So a job well done.
We have Councillor Davey.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment as well. I think the reports was very well done, and I'm glad the development community came in. It really must be a struggle for our planning staff to both want to build a community that we can be proud of in terms of citizen inputs, good planning principles. At the same time, we have to be careful not to put so many rules and regulations in place that it creates a disincentive for the people that actually build these structures to perhaps choose to go somewhere else. So I think with staff's work, and I think with the changes and the amendment before us, I think we're going to strike a good balance in that respect, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the city in the future.
Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much. I too will add my comments and thanks as I started to earlier with staff. I'm just trying to find here we go, a particular reference that I noted earlier on, and this will appeal to some members of council in particular. But overall, as I said, the document I think is very well thought out. We had excellent citizen engagement and engagement from the industry and others in the preparation of this document. It is very thorough and lays the groundwork that's necessary for next steps. There is some questions, and that's good because I think that's always what challenges us to just up our game even that much more and address some of the issues. I am pleased that we did have the Schneider Creek neighborhood do the work that they did, because I think it starts demonstrating how some of these documents will blend. In terms of the preferred plan that's before us, on page 22, one of the things that's referenced in terms of bonusing in exchange for community benefits is the possibility for looking at how affordable housing fits into this. And certainly I know that's a priority for myself and several members of council as we continually look at how we can address affordable housing in terms of what we do and what we might be doing in the future with our partners from both the provincial and federal government as additional dollars come available through the region for those kinds of initiatives. So overall, this is, I think, really a top-end leading document that's going to help guide us for the foreseeable future of our community as we begin to take advantage of what our new rapid transit system is going to mean for our community and for this region.
No doubt, this is definitely a comprehensive document that deals with a lot of stakeholders, and I know a lot of my fellow colleagues have mentioned all the stakeholders involved. But what I really like about this document in particular is I think we need to be able to concentrate not just only on high-rise developments. We also need to concentrate on mixed different property uses from low to medium, and I think there is a balance in here, and that's where I'm pleased to see, because I don't want to see just all straight high rises, because as we know, land prices they go up, and then we're going to have a situation where it's just going to be all condo developments. And great, condo developments are great, but I think not everyone wants to live in a condo, so I think we need to provide a lifestyle for different lifestyles, so different housing for different lifestyles. So with that, we will be voting on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then on the main motion, recorded vote. That's carried unanimously. So I just want to touch base with staff on regards to when are we going to be dealing with the Crosby, just for the members of the public, and the secondary plan?
The next phase of Crosby, we're proposing to table a report on May 30th with new downtown zones, including bonusing, parking regulations, and I think major infrastructure and utilities, if I'm correct. So that will be tabled on May the 30th, and then that will be seeking direction to do open houses at the end of June.
Okay.
So the consultation will start then.
Okay. Thank you. Next item up, item number 2, dealing with Environmental Committee recommendation, Our Horizon, climate change warning labels on gas pumps. And we do have a delegation, Mr. Robert Shirkley from Our Horizon. But yeah, we'll give everyone a minute just for.
Oh, looks like it's up.
You can wait just another 30
okay.
seconds. I'll let you know.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Shirkley, go right ahead. You have 5 minutes to provide your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members and staff, for having me here today. My name is Rob Shirkey. I'm a lawyer and executive director of a climate change nonprofit called Our Horizon. And what we're advocating for in municipalities across the country and beyond our borders are the use of climate change risk disclosures on gas pump nozzles. Big picture, where I see this piece fitting in, is there's a lot of systemic inertia to the status quo. So a fossil fuel-based economy, it's something, it's all we've ever known. It's completely normalized. And on the demand side of the equation, when it comes to our consumption of fossil fuels, you have habitual, automatic, completely normalized behavior that's just part of the everyday fabric of living. And as long as that's the situation downstream among end users of the product, it's sort of the perfect social environment to perpetuate the status quo. So what this idea does is it sort of disrupts it in denormalizing our use of fossil fuels. It creates greater impetus for reform, which could result in some individual behavioral change, which is interesting, but can also create this shift in demand that then encourages government and business to respond with alternate solutions. So here, sort of think of this as a template design. Top half, an image that communicates climate change or air pollution risks. Bottom half, some text. And then, of course, a link to a website where people can learn more about individual actions to reduce their carbon footprint. The idea has been endorsed by a lot of academics, actually, from universities in the area here, but across North America. Some of the features of it is it sort of takes a situation of no feedback, where there's this delay between cause and effect, between our combustion of fossil fuels and their impacts, and it builds feedback just through the use of image and text, brings those faraway consequences more into the here and now, and counteracts what psychologists call the current moment bias, which is our tendency to prefer interests that are small and near in time relative to those that are significant but far down the road. It addresses what social psychologists call diffusion of responsibility. So as individuals, our contribution to the problem is small. Of course, collectively, our actions are altering the chemistry of our planet, and social psychologists know that when that's the case, we're actually less likely to act. And so the placement of the label on the gas pump nozzle, it takes a problem of diffuse origins and it concentrates responsibility. It locates responsibility in the palm of your hand. So it addresses that problem as well. And as simple as the idea is, and actually it's interesting to think that there's nothing like it out there that connects us to the impacts of our fossil fuel use in quite a direct way. So it is an interesting intervention. Those of you familiar with externalities or hidden costs, we have pricing regimes like a cap and trade system or a carbon tax that seek to communicate these externalities through the use of this sort of quantitative language, the use of dollars and cents. What this idea does is it uses this qualitative language, so it uses image and text to communicate hidden costs to the end users. And there's a lot of interesting research from behavioral economics that suggests that the latter might actually even be a more compelling intervention. So it addresses this aspect as well. So communications theory, Marshall McLuhan's famous, the medium is the message. What's interesting about the gas pump nozzle, that being the medium, of course then being the message as well, is we may have consumed information on climate change through other media, but you really transition from being a passive observer to being an active participant. There you are now engaged in that, which research suggests it's this latter state that's almost a prerequisite for change. At its core, I think the idea is disruptive. I'm going to skip over some of this. Maybe we could go into it during the Q&A just because I'm low on time. I'll just tell you where it's at legislatively in our vision going forward. So you have Berkeley, San Francisco, Santa Monica, and Seattle are all in various stages of the legislative process of considering this. A colleague from San Francisco just advised me that they're going to be bringing it forward very shortly for decision. In Canada, West Vancouver last year unanimously passed a resolution in support of the idea. And then what ended up happening is youth across the country began to bring similar resolutions forward where they were endorsed by councils. Then the entire Union of British Columbia municipalities voted in favor of it. And in November of last year, the city of North Vancouver became the first municipality, the first jurisdiction in the world to mandate climate change and air pollution risk disclosures on gas pumps. That made media in Canada and abroad. This is Univision. It's the #1 Spanish-speaking network in the U.S., Sweden, the Netherlands, and so on. And this is the last slide. The top half of the map contains, I just got that from a tobacco control website, all the places in the world, most of them anyway, that have the tobacco risk disclosures on gas pumps. I frequently hear from people in different parts of the world that say, oh, this is evocative of what we do with this other product. How can we get this done here? And so the lower half is actually some analytics from a website that was hosting our content. So people already all over the world are learning about this idea. To accelerate its adoption, over the last 3 months, we've had volunteers across the country go to government websites around the world to collect email addresses of your counterparts. And so people that are members of Under 2 MOU, Compact of Mayors, C40, and a lot of states that have these tobacco labels. This month, they're actually going to be getting an email from us about what we think is a simple, low-cost intervention to make us feel more connected to the impacts of fossil fuels, to then create this ideal social environment to finally address climate change in a meaningful way. And the ask today is just to put in a request for a staff report to study the matter to see if this is something that Kitchener wants to partake in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shirkley. We do have a question for you. Councillor Marsh.
Hello. Thank you for coming in and sharing this initiative with us. So it looks like this has already been presented to and proposed by the Environmental Committee. So that's good. Now, I'm wondering, what do you see as the next step? So let's say that we've seen that cigarette smoking has really been reduced significantly just in one generation. And so what do you hope this will achieve?
So it's interesting. With the tobacco analogy, those tobacco warnings have had an impact almost wherever they're used all over the world in terms of reducing, so that behavioral change, so reducing consumption of the product. But it also leads to this shift in attitude, studies show, that then enable all sorts of other interventions to take place. So it could be things like not smoking in bars and so on. And so the analogy then that I sometimes try to make with the impact that these labels might have, so it could provide, for a lot of the reasons I sort of went through with the building feedback, locating responsibility, communicating externalities, and so on, It could be what then leads an individual to then perhaps better consider taking public transit, or maybe there's a carpooling app that people are using, or maybe there's on the city's website all the cycling infrastructure that can be taken advantage of. So this sort of takes that habitual automatic, basically the status quo, the norm, creates some dissonance, and you can then funnel that into this productive behavior. I think I'm more interested though in this sort of shift in attitudes and this shift in demand. I think in as long as and sort of on top of the behavior being so deeply ingrained and normalized, the discourse in Canada on climate change tends to be focused upstream. So it's a problem of oil sands or pipelines and offshore drilling and shipping and so on. And I think in this constant upstreaming narrative, that actually increases the experiential gap. So what I'm suggesting we do is to sort of almost reflect the mirror downstream, feel more connected to these problems. That then creates greater social impetus to address it. And I think what you'll see government then with more political space to, it could be maybe more funding for public transit or more cycling infrastructure or whatever sort of the proposal is. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll also see business then more incentivized to deliver alternate solutions to meet the shift in demand. So, okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, and maybe more people will start to drive electric cars even.
That's the idea, and I think we can accelerate those solutions to market too.
Okay, thank you. I'm prepared to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Well, we have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you kindly.
Anyone, you're ready to move the motion forward? Or you have questions of staff? Mayor Ravanovich?
Yeah, so I do have one question of staff. Staff are being asked to look into jurisdictional issues and capacity to require the implementation and so on. I'm wondering if we can get any indication from legal staff. I mean, is that something we can do in-house? What kind of resources are going to be required to do that?
Mr. Tansley?
My understanding is that research has already been done and disseminated, so I don't think it's actually necessary to add that aspect to the resolution because it would be redundant.
Okay. When the jurisdiction issue has been disseminated?
Oh, yes. Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, that opinion was rendered actually in the previous term of council, and Ms. McDonald circulated it last week to update all members of council.
I must have missed it. Thank you.
Councillor Unesky?
I'm a little confused now. What Mr. Tanzi has said, that it's redundant and we're not to be included. Are you talking about the last line in the recommendation? Is that my understanding, or I wasn't sure what the mayor's question was exactly, because I know he was asking about the jurisdiction, but help me out here.
That's correct. The last paragraph of the resolution, that staff be directed to investigate, that investigation has already been done and provided to council last week.
And what was the answer? I'm just trying to recall.
That would be a legal opinion, so it wouldn't be something that we would normally release publicly. However, the point being that the resolution asks staff to investigate something, and we can say that that investigation has already occurred and been given to council, so rendering the last portion of the proposed resolution redundant.
Okay, I got you now. Thank you.
Well,
Go on, Mayor Ravanovich, go ahead.
Thank you. Just then, in light of that, and I've just read that now, I'm not sure where Councillor Marsh might be going with the recommendation then.
All right, so perhaps I could ask the clerk's assistants with we're going to just, or perhaps it's not necessary, that the motion before us is that the City of Kitchener supports and advances the following recommendation for consideration by the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau and the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, to do all the way down, and we can take off the last paragraph and the last two words of the previous paragraph to that. So the ending would be, therefore be it resolved that all vendors of retail petroleum products in Canada be legislated to provide warning labels at all pump handles and or pump panels, and that those companies who do not have this feature on their pump handle be obligated to fit them with the plastic sleeves which will allow warning labels to be displayed. Period. So really, it's just a recommendation it's a motion to be forwarded. It's not it doesn't affect our staff time.
So that's fine.
Okay. We can have comments. Councillor Davey. Go ahead, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I wanted to comment, make it clear, because I am going to vote against this, and I want to be clear as to why. I absolutely hate that we burn fossil fuels for transportation. I will be one of the first people, once electric cars become affordable, to purchase one. I can't wait for the day. But I really don't see this as contributing significantly to a solution to the problem. I think the huge difference between cigarettes and the consumption of gasoline is that many people today still burn fossil fuels, like myself, because there is very limited ability to do something otherwise. And by virtue of the fact that we're just taking revenue away, for example, my understanding is a lot of the companies that have these petroleum companies, they have advertising now, and the advertising there will be lost. And for those that don't even have the system in place, we'll have to incur costs to put it in place. And I really don't see it changing behavior to any significant extent in the same way that cigarette advertising has. What I would prefer to see, if we're going to go after companies to incur costs, I want to see something that's going to have some practical, tangible change in terms of there's a million different things that can be done. We can invest more in battery technology. We can encourage more investment in public transit. I think that's the solution. I really don't see this as being, and I feel quite terrible I have to vote against it, but it does really seem like more of a gesture than something I think is going to achieve actual change, and I can't support that.
Okay, we have no further comments or questions. Councillor Marsh.
Sure, a recorded vote has been called, but just before that, I just want to respond. I fully respect Councillor Davies' opinion about this. However, I personally feel that any social behavior change on a wide scale like that is being sought after in this case takes a multi-pronged approach. And it's true that other forms of convincing the general public to shift their attitudes and behaviors really will require much more than a warning label on a gas pump. I think that it can be an effective form of just a reminder each time that a person goes to fill the pump, fill their gas tank. But I do see that it's not an end-all, be-all solution. It's just a small part of the solution. Okay, with that, I encourage everyone to vote for it.
I'll make a comment here as well. I think it's more of a symbolic gesture than anything to point out to Councillor Davey. I too don't think it's going to change much in the sense of people's behaviors with regards to purchasing petrol, but I think it's rather symbolic. So with that, a recorded vote's been called for. What's that? I did switch over. All those in favor, please stand. Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. We have no further items. That concludes Planning and Strategic Initiative Committee meeting. Thank you. We finished right on time, too.